Hello world, my name is Data Mining Mike, and on this episode of the podcast we are going to talk about how to grow a business database. Relational databases are an important part of any serious business and central to all data mining operations. Today we have a special guest, robr. Rob is a Gonzaga professor and an industry authority for over 25 years. Rob is an expert database engineer and SQL consultant as well as cybersecurity specialist. I am highly confident at the end of this period of instruction, you will be able to take what you have learned and apply it to your business in some manner. And that's called value. And because of that, you should like, share this video, subscribe, smash bell, leave comments. As a data scientist, I get asked all the time, how can you make money with ChatGPT? And I say, by owning shares of stock in the company that owns the server farms. And that company is Iron Mountain, ticker symbol IRM. Iron Mountain is a real estate investment trust, or REIT, and it pays a really decent dividend along with exponentiating growth. Iron Mountain, ticker symbol IRM. Tell the world about you.
All right. My name's robr, and I am the founder of IDIC Designs, IDIC Designs. IDIC is infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And my focus in business and in life is about data management and building systems that are fluid and change over time without restricting your growth opportunities.
Cool. Tell the audience about your highest level of education.
So I have a bachelor's degree in English and broadcast media. And then I did graduate work at Eastern University in rhetoric and technical writing, but in my final semester or final quarter, I should say, I got into computers and I was doing some programming, early programming in HyperCard, and then from there I became self-taught on everything digital and computers. I hold certifications with Microsoft as a solution developer, database administrator, and so on. But that's my education journey.
What languages can you code in?
I work in C#, JavaScript, and VB, .NET, but primarily I spend my days working in Transact SQL and SQL Server.
Okay, cool. So how long have you been working in SQL?
Let's see, it would be 27 years roughly. So in 1993 I went to work for a computer training center, and we were teaching all kinds of applications, your usual office suite productivity, and I wanted to branch out a little bit, and so I was looking for something to distinguish myself. And we, as a Microsoft partner, we were getting all this free software from Microsoft. And in 1 month's bundle came this 15 diskette set of software called Microsoft Access Beta.
Okay, so the first Access system.
First Access. And I took that home and I installed it because everybody was doing Word, everybody was doing Excel, everybody did PowerPoint, but nobody knew about Access. And so I thought this was going to be a way to distinguish myself. And in my storage unit, I still have that original set of diskettes because I want to tie myself back to that. But I found I had an affinity for data and information flow. And so I started up that ladder, so to speak. And you don't get too far with Microsoft Access in a business setting until you realize its limitations. And so that led me to SQL Server about 1997. And I think that's when I got my first certification in SQL Server. And so from there, I took off. And of course, that was also the age when the internet suddenly became a focus. And so I merged my two interests, which was how the internet worked and how databases worked. And so I built my own content management system that I've been developing for, more than 20 years now, since 1998, 99 or so.
A SQL Server based database that you have been using. So you're a SQL you're an Oracle fan.
It's one of those comparisons. I readily accept that SQL Server and Oracle have competing products. I have also studied them to a point of understanding that every product has a motivation, has a metaphor, so to speak, how they view the world. And Oracle and SQL Server are kind of opposites in that. But the beauty of the language is that it was defined to be agnostic. So there's a lot of SQL developers that really, it doesn't matter whether you're on MySQL or Oracle or SQL Server or Access, the same code runs on all those platforms. But if you're looking for me as an engineering expert, it would be in this Microsoft SQL Server platform. That has been the only one I've ever really explored in its depth.
Cool. So talk about how relational databases work with your daily life.
Well, fundamentally, transactional business needs a relational database. And this goes back to the earliest mentors I had in learning data, and that was C.J. Date. He wrote a book called Introduction to Database Systems. And that is kind of the foundation Bible, if you will, about how to build relational databases. C.J. Date was the creator of IBM's DB2 platform, how it was working. He didn't write the code, but he was the philosophical advisor about how it should work and what it did. So I read that book religiously for the first 4 or 5 years, reading it every year and getting more and more out of it. So from a business point of view, while internet has encouraged us to think more big data like, where we just throw data into a pool and we try to scrape it and learn things from it, the reality is if you're a business owner, you really need clear data. You need to know this is a customer, this is an order, this is a product, whatever it is, and relational databases build that in. And so today I would still say any project somebody brings to me and says, we want to build a database, my go-to toolkit is, okay, let's build it as a relational database, because if I'm not going to develop it beyond the initial foundation, I want to hand it off to somebody who understands exactly the way I saw the world when I began that project. And so relational is the way to do that. Now, 20 years ago or so, or a little bit more than that, I realized that there was a fundamental limitation in relational design, and that led to a lot of products that have functional limitations. And it has nothing to do with whether a computer can do it. It has everything to do with whether it can be represented in the database. And that's where you need something more fluid or more flexible. And along with the spirit of my philosophy, I was looking for an alternative. And that's where I went beyond relational databases and started working on something I called associative database, which to me is more natural from an organic or even what am I trying to think of in terms of a realistic life way. We don't see things as just relational. We see them as associative. I connect two things together because I want to, not because they belong together.
So do you how do you associate them?
Well, the fundamental design of it is to recognize that databases are driven by unique values. And C.J. Date's work, while so phenomenal, always came down to an assumption that there was a core identity, a unique value that was connected to discrete or specific values of information. So I can find a database record in a table called people, and I'm going to get an ID for a person, and then it's going to have a first name, Rob, last name, Reuter, and any other related pieces of data that somebody wants to know about people. And that's good relational design. And I can, teach this to anyone as to why we do it that way. But fundamentally, there's a problem with it, and that is because we don't assign keys in a way that makes them globally unique. And so our challenge is that if I assign you a value of 100, and then I have a product table, and I have a product 100, how do I know one is Mike? One of them is Mike and the other one is the product. There's nothing that makes them stand out to each other. And that fundamentally limits the way databases are built. And it requires a lot of labor, a lot of people sitting there going, oh, okay, the products are connected to the order, and the order detail connects to the main order, and then the order is bought by a person, and so on. So suddenly 100 as a person and 100 as a product now makes sense. In my view of the world, everything is about the keys. The data is a result of creating a connection between two absolutely unique items. One is a person and one is a product. And if I want to connect them together for whatever reason, I should be able to do that without having to go through the transaction in the meantime. So that's where my associative model is designed to go beyond basic limitations.
Okay. So you have a person and a product, and instead of, I may be wrong. So you're saying you have a person and a product. What's your next part? What's the next step?
So the next step is to understand that everything has a key.
Okay.
So if I create a key and I make sure that key is universal, then whatever I attach that key to becomes what that key is in the system. So let me illustrate. So early on, I was in an organization that was heavy on sales. And the problem we had was, this is really early days, we still had DOS-based CRM.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody's entering their information in a DOS window and filling out, editing records and so on. And we're we're 1997, 1998, and people are entering these into DOS programs. And suddenly we have this new thing in the world. It's called email. And everybody's looking at this program and going, okay, where do we put the email address? Oh, yeah. We have a product that was built at a time when there was no email, and everything was considered to be a single phone. Well, what about cell phones? What about what about this? What about that? And so what I observed was that the data drove the way the application was built. So nobody imagined email, so they didn't provide for email. And then they built the application on top of it. And that's where I kept seeing these problems. And I realized, okay, I'm going to look at this a different way. What if I could store anything in the database I wanted? And then the relationships are free. You can just connect them anytime and anywhere you want. And so that's the way I did it. You might consider another illustration, 26 letters in the alphabet. Control every idea, everything we're saying right now, everything we're doing is literally connected to 26 unique keys that have been developed over millennia by human beings. And yet, without those 26 symbols, those unique values, we couldn't communicate the way we do today. And the same can be said for life itself. A, T, G, C, 4 unique nucleic acids. Combine them together in random but meaningful association, and you have the foundation of a blade of grass, a bird in the tree, a human being. And human beings are even unique in the fact that they have 2 DNAs. We have our cellular DNA, and then we have our mitochondrial DNA.
Oh.
Same combinations, but functionally 2 wildly different life forms that symbiotically work together. And all of it has to do with association and not relationship necessarily.
That is a really profound way to look at it. So what you're saying is when you want to create a relationship between, say, customer, well, you were kind of alluding to the fact that you just want a global variable that represented one customer. Mm-hmm. And anything essentially that customer touches will have been connected with
that global ID,
with some sort of relationship, a one-to-many or a one-to-one relationship or a many-to-many relationship, depending. Right. And so, okay, so I take it you have a dictionary defined somewhere. So talk about your process of that.
Yeah, so my processes are that I basically work with keys and associations. And ultimately, everything comes back to that combination. So a key establishes uniqueness, and the associations are how I want to use that key. And because of that, I can build queries that are searchable by random inputs, because as long as I know, as long as I identify a key, then I have all the relationships that goes with that key. And so I'm not tied to, this is how you find a phone number, this is how you find a product or things. I find all of them at the same time. I built a version of this model around 2008, and it was a CRM approach that I was building at the time. And it was built on a journey kind of model. So every time you logged into the site and you put in a search term, it would come back and bring back objects that matched that term. And then you would identify when you'd click it, and it would become the focus. And then everything connected to that object would then be displayed down there, and you would get categories. So you go, here's the ad, so let's bring up IDIC Designs. Okay, here's the address. Here's 3 phone numbers. Here's 5 people. Here are, notes about all of this. And then every time you saw that in a list, you could click on one of those items, and that would become the focus of the query.
So kind of like Access.
Even more powerful. Yeah, Access, because remember, Access is still limited by the relationships that go table to table to table.
Mm-hmm.
Since my associations are all in one table, I have access to everything all the time. So you start with a company like IDIC Designs, you find a phone number. Let's say that's the only 2 pieces of information you have. But if you put this in a sufficiently large company database, there are other people out there who may have encountered that phone number in other context. And my system allows you to not duplicate information. Remember, everything is globally unique. So if you put in the same phone number on 2 different screens, they go to the same associations. So now you're sitting here and you're going, okay, IDIC Designs, yeah, okay, that's Rob and da-da. Oh, phone number, yeah, that's his phone number. Click, what do I know about that phone number? Boom, that becomes the focus of the question now. And now all the associations with that phone number come up.
Gotcha.
And now all of a sudden you discover, hey, that phone number is associated with some entity called Small Biz Operating System. What do I know about that? Click. Now that becomes the focus. And suddenly everything you know about Small Biz Operating System is the focus of that. And it becomes a perpetual thread that connects you through the world of your database, allowing you to follow links and connections and discovering the knowledge that comes from multiple people participating in that environment.
So how do you reduce redundancy?
By rigidly focusing on the content. So in my system, the one I'm building now, prior models, I didn't have this luxury of working out, but now I'm taking it on. When you enter information into the system, it is not going to store the data as you necessarily entered it. It's going to go through an algorithm. It's going to say, have I already stored this information before? If so, bring back that unique ID, because that data is also stored uniquely. So the more you store things, I actually have envisioned that an early edition of this model, this platform, is literally going to store all 40, 50,000 words in the English language, all going to be stored. I can put all the zip codes into it. I can put all the city names, all of the, things that CJ Date 40 years ago envisioned as this amazing capability of databases that were beyond our capabilities is now available. And that was to create these pools of information that are related to a single theme. So I need all the cities in the world. I don't have to have you enter them all. Mm-hmm. I can go get them from various sources and preload the database. So now when you're filling out a form and you put in your city name, I'm going to go and check, oh yeah, got that city. And now it becomes non-redundant because we're religiously focusing on making sure every piece of data is stored once in the database. And that's the ideal relational databases were designed on, is eliminate redundancy and improve your accuracy. And this will be possible because we can literally control the data from that associative point of view, and say, I don't need to copy Rob into the database 50 times because there are 50 different Robs. All I need to do is store it once because ROB is a first name that people type into their database. And so that way I can manage the redundancy.
Yeah. I'm just trying to visualize this in my mind. I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to speak it out for the audience that cannot visualize
Absolutely.
it. So there is tables, and each one of these tables, so there's a customer table, a products table, an order table, anything you can think of, you can reduce it down to a table. And then from that point, every single table has a primary key and a secondary key, some do. And the primary keys associate, the primary keys associate different tables with each other, because if I have a customer, if we have Rob with customer 101, he's gonna be associated with that primary key if he is the customer primary key. And there's also a hierarchy on primary keys too that I seem to be leaving out. It's been a while since I've drawn out a relational database.
So what you're describing is the relational model, and that is the way it's designed. You create themes: person, product, receipt, and you store in those tables what belongs to the receipt that is not a person, and you put what is, and this was something that CJ Date talked about, is functional dependency. There needs to be a one-to-one relationship between a piece of data and its key.
True. Yes.
And so you want to make that really clear. The challenge we saw was that sometimes in business, that functional dependency doesn't work in the model of how the business operates. So a story from my past, I have a friend, Sherry, that we bounce ideas of databases off. And years ago, she came to me because she was working on this database for a trucking business. There was a brokerage. They brokered truckloads from point A to point B and things, and managed all the paperwork and so on. And one day she called me up and she says, okay, this is really crazy. She says, I know that we have customers table, and we have a vendors table, and then we have I can't remember the term she had, but she had a table for the actual driver, the person who was delivering the load. That was 3 entities that every contract dealt with. And so she had done good relational design, and she had her customers table. That's who wants the shipment delivered. You have the vendor, who is actually the product shipper, the person who's sending the product. And then you had the third table, which was the actual the partner, I'll call it partner for this point, who actually drives the vehicle from point A to point B, and so on. So all three have to be involved in a contract. Her problem was that in different contracts, the same entity in the customer table might be the vendor in some contracts, and they might be the partner in another contract.
I got you.
And so she was going, how do I do this? Because I don't want to duplicate all the contact information, all the, I want to be able to show that in this transaction, they were vendor or they were customer. Over here, they were vendor. Over here, they were partner. And that's reinforced the idea that relational tables have their limitation. Mm-hmm. So what I'm doing is I'm saying what matters is not the actual data, not the name of the business, not the name of the person. That can be moved off to its own set of tables related to data. Mm. What matters in the transaction is that there was a vendor who is associated with a customer and who found a matching partner who would help complete the transaction. And if you have an association between those three keys stored in your database, you have everything you need to know about that transaction. Everything else is user interface, is just making it human readable. And this is where functionally my model is different than a relational model, because you would be right in a lot of databases. You're going to open up the database and you're going to find the customers and you're going to find the products and you're going to find the employees and so on. In mine, you have keys, associations, and data. And that's all you need. It's in the way you write the query that all that other stuff happens. And so that's the fundamental difference. And the long-term benefit is it's more flexible. You can change your business. You can decide that, this is now going to change, and you don't have to go through these costs of going, wow, I'm going to have to get a programmer in here and they're going to have to go back and learn what we did first time, and then they're going to have to figure out how to write it differently to do it this way now. In my model, you open up your application and you go and say, people are now going to be customers.
Yeah.
Boom. Done. Don't need anything else in the system, because the data takes care of itself as long as you build the relationships between concepts that you want. So it's a complicated subject, and one I'm still learning to tell the story of in a way that makes sense to business owners. But I know from experience, when I can sit somebody down and show them the experience of it, they immediately see the value, because they realize, oh, I don't have to wait for months and only find out that they didn't understand the original request I made. And this, I think, is why we have businesses that get slower and slower and eventually just fade out, because the debt of building something unique and custom is so costly over time that they just can't survive. But my belief is in rapid development and testing and experimenting, and then, okay, did it work? Great. Move on.
I guess my a big concern for the audience is not really for the audience. It's always a big concern of mine, making sure when you're going to query something that you get a fast populated answer, mm-hmm. and you don't have those many-to-many relationships. So right. Could you go into the normalization process? So what's your thought on that?
So you are you've kind of put your finger right on the key issue that we've discovered over the years working with this model. And that is, when you focus so much on many-to-many relationships and things, you have what a former programmer and I used to call the cliff. The data was screaming fast, and then you'd hit this cliff, and performance would just plummet. And it had a lot to do with the fact that associations are genetic. And by that I mean parent to child to child to child to child. And so they're circular referenced. And so you have to constantly protect yourself against going too deep into associations, because you bring up too much of the data in the associations for one query. And so a lot of times what I do is I put limitations on it, and I say, we can't show you every association in this scenario, because that would be too much. But we can page it. We can take and show you the first 500, and if you want more, we'll go deeper into that. So you're right. It's the Achilles heel, if it has one, is the fact that it can hit a wall where suddenly performance drops off. But I'm always working on, better hardware, better system, underneath it to make that possible. And I'm also in the newer versions, I'm segmenting certain associations are segmented off because they need to be independent of others. So data surrounding your application needs to be separate from data generated by users in the system, because we don't want the application to be held hostage to somebody going crazy and adding all these data relationships into the thing. And the data table itself will also have its own associations. So that way, building out your report, building out your screen will not be held hostage to how much associations there are in your data. So, but other than that, I also basically go grandparent, parent, child. That's kind of, I think, solves most people's problem. But if need be, I can go deeper than that.
So how do you deal with recursive relationships?
Like all good recursion, you need to always know what your exit is in recursion. And so for those who listening are not familiar with this, a book, Gödel, Escher, Bach is a great introduction to the idea of recursive algorithms. And the model is simply, genealogy. If I go to Ancestry.com and I put myself in, and it starts bubbling, it starts going up and saying, oh, I found your parents, and then your parents found your grandparents, and your grandparents found your great-grandparents, and so on and so on. And that is really powerful stuff. But I think if you're familiar with the interface, you understand that even they have to deal with the problem of recursion, because there are 8+ billion human beings on the planet now, untold billions going backwards. And so the idea that we could connect one person connects to how many thousands of human beings in time, you just have to go and say, okay, we're going to take you back to this level, and then we're going to put that little leaf up, and we're going to say, there's more if you want to go deeper. But then notice how that works. You hit the leaf, and now you have a new focus. That's a great grandparent. Now they can go back 3 more generations, focusing on that object as the child and figure out what are the parents and the grandparents of that. And then again, they'll stop. They'll say, now what? Oh, let's go follow this one. Okay, boom, fill out that part of the tree. And so the same thing happens in my model is I'm going to give you a certain limitation. I'm going to say, hey, I can return to you 500 associations or 1,000 associations in a reasonable amount of time. And so you get the first 500 or 1,000 for free. But if you want to go deeper than that, you're going to have to either go into the tool and tell me I want more and I'm prepared to wait, or you're going to have to follow my logic, which is look at your first 500, find something of interest, then focus on that one and go find 500 more relationships. And from there, go and find the next one. And it can be many, because something else about genealogy is that relationships have meaning or purpose. And so you might have, 5 relationships with the same person with different roles. And each of those is a unique relationship in this. And you might want to be able to look at the world from this perspective of the role. So who am I a mentor of, and who am I a mentee of? Those are roles. They're not meaning. There's no field that we put in mentor or mentee. But there's a relationship that I have with someone that fits that definition. And so, there's a lot we can do to save performance time and things, but we have to create that boundary and say, do this recursive algorithm 500 times and then stop. Or do it 3 levels and then stop at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was following what you were saying, and I also thought of it on 2 separate levels too. It also made me think of this machine learning model called a random forest.
Mm-hmm.
That's based off of nodes and leaves. As soon as you started talking about leaves, I was like, okay, leaves, nodes. Sounds like a random forest that you could
right.
You can iterate through it so many times, and which is a powerful model. Mm-hmm. And that's another one of those models that people tend to forget about. They think machine learning, they think just ChatGPT, as if ChatGPT is
much more.
Yeah, there is, and there's a lot of great older models that have been around that people don't really give much credit for, which your database system could definitely help out with too, and one of which is called market basket analysis, so MBA.
Right.
Yeah, so MBA it's a machine learning model that associates lift and confidence. So confidence and lift are these 2 metrics that are derived when 2 people buy something. Or when somebody buys something. So for example, diapers and beer are associated with each other in some high 60% of purchases. And this has been known since the 70s, when they first, created market basket analysis as a statistical method. And to this day, you can see how the grocery stores have shifted where they place the items based off of market basket analysis. And if the store is ran by a woman, the beer will be as far away from the diapers as possible. If the store's ran by a man, it'll be right next to the diapers.
Yeah.
So that's just my tangent.
There's this. Well, let me put a picture on this for the audience because there's something that they see, the market basket analysis. I teach this at Gonzaga.
Which he's a teacher at Gonzaga, which is very important point to bring up for his credibility and expertise.
So when I teach the information systems class, we get into big data, and one of the things we talk about is market basket analysis. And an experience that I'm sure many of the audience have of that is going shopping at Amazon and saying those who bought also bought this. And that's a market basket analysis. So if you're going to buy an Instant Pot and that's what you came to the site for, the market basket analysis has figured out if you're buying an Instant Pot, the likelihood is that you are new to Instant Pots, or you're new to pressure cookers and things. And so they have discovered that, an extra lid or a cookbook is most often purchased at the same time that this. So Amazon, give that background to those terms, will realize that if they show you the Instant Pot with a extra lid and with a glass lid and a cookbook, have a lift of getting more purchases than if you just offered the Instant Pot by itself. Because somebody will scan that screen and they're going to look at that and going, oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. And with one click, they've now not only made one purchase, they've made 3 purchases. And Amazon is obviously going to be promoting something that gives them the best gross margin on those things. And so they're making more money by simply showing you that. And that confidence factor of knowing that these things most often are purchased together is also part of that, analysis. And yes, you're leading towards something I hope to, I have to first come up with a product that, that killer app that people want, which I have an idea of what that killer app is going to be in 2024. But the other part of it is then to hook it in with an API to a larger AI that can learn how to navigate all those associations and be able to do things that I haven't, I have dreams of, Alexa apps and things like that are going to be able to, interact with you verbally while you navigate through the database and things like that.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool if you could take the corpus of tech. And I really think that's where it could go, is if you have the data in the base. And okay, so you talked about the world of API, and that's changed things a lot too. Okay, that a lot of people don't realize we don't live in the digital age. We live in the age of API, which I didn't realize it until I learned it. And then you realize, oh yeah, this is totally different. So API, explain to the world what API is.
So API, Application Programming Interface, is the way that software talk to each other. So I've been around technology long enough that I still remember the beginnings of this. I mean, we in the late 90s there was a big explosion of, with the internet growth. There was this sudden recognition that businesses could save money by eliminating paper. We didn't have to do transactions by recording it in our database and then clicking on a button to print it onto paper and then send that and pay postage and do all this, they started realizing that with the internet connecting us together, we could do electronic document interchange, or EDI. And I was there when they were so excited. They envisioned that communities like Spokane would have a business that would set up an EDI platform, and businesses that wanted to do business with each other would simply publish to that platform the way they wanted to receive their data from their partner. And it was a format we called XML, Extended Markup Language, and it was a document that described an invoice for the vernacular. It says, here's an invoice for IDIC Designs. And if you want to do business with IDIC Designs, then you present, you offer information in this format, we'll consume it, and then we will pay you based on that. That was the world that they saw. Well, the internet grew much faster than anyone ever imagined. And so the explosion of software as a service, of building tools that would serve one thing. Like right now I'm working with a customer and we're looking at a scheduling system, and that's all it does, is just manage calendars, and it's great. The challenge is that companies, and especially startups, are struggling because they have to go buy all these products and try to merge them together in one place. And they say, we want it to work together. And that's where a programming interface allows you to do that. You let each business be an expert at what they're good at, and then they expose that functionality to you so you can incorporate it into your business as a one click, and boom, it does something. So I work with a customer that we're always integrating on the HR level. My customer does background checks. We integrate with human resources platforms that are collecting information about candidates. And so we have an API exchange between their HR data and our background check resources. And so we do that exchange electronically. And nobody has to know how it works. All they do is say, is it ready? They say, yep, we're live. And off we go. So that's the power of the internet coming. And I think we're going to discover more and more that the API layer is really the vision that, Bill Gates had 20 years ago when he was talking about the, business intelligence. He was saying it's all about not what you do, but how you expose your platform to the world that is going to make you profitable and productive. And so that's what we're trying to build here. Challenge right now is APIs tend to be very rigid. They do what they do, and you have to conform to them and not necessarily they conform to you. And my goal, I'm a contrarian in so many ways when it comes to digital world. I like simple exchange. What do you have for me? Send it. I have a system that'll figure out what it contains, and that's why my associations are going to be so powerful, because I'm going to be able to take anybody's format of an information dump, and I'm going to be able to map it into my system so that it's automated. I don't have to write new code because I have a new partner. I just say, dump your data here and tell me how it connects to what I need to know. And after that, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Do it in an hour rather than weeks that currently needed.
Yeah, absolutely. You You nailed some points I was thinking of. The way I describe API to people, this is the way I finally understood it in my mind. The way I understood it is, it's like a oil pipeline, right? And this oil is gonna be dirty. The data's dirty, so the data is the oil. Or it's like an energy, like literally like an energy plug that you plug into and you instantly get that data. Yeah. And it's quick. But like you said, yeah, it's rigid. You're only the API only gives you the format that it is designed to give you for whatever it populates. And then it's on you to take those variables and then run it through some sort of cleaning algorithm that's going to clean it. Like, for example, when I pull YouTube data from a YouTube channel, I pull it on API into Python, and then from there I know like date time is going to be different, so I know I have to parse out date time after that. Yep. So yeah, it's a matter of, it's kind of like you can get the food from the grocery store, but you still have to prepare the food yourself.
Yep.
Kind of way.
I like that.
Yeah.
I really liked your analogy about pipelines. I'm a collector of all kinds of odd bits of information, but oil pipelines are particularly fascinating to me, because if someone doesn't understand how a pipeline actually functions, pipelines are shared API for oil. So there's a pipeline vendor who creates a pipeline to connect a region that needs oil with a region that has oil to send. But notice I said region, not a specific set of oil, not a specific supplier of oil, a region for oil. It's up to the suppliers to decide that there is a market for their oil and to then tie in to that pipeline. And what's so fascinating about it is the nature of the transactions. So everybody puts their oil into the same pipeline, and it literally comes in bundles and batches and things. And so one pipeline can be diesel and oil that will make diesel, and oil that will make gasoline, and high octane and low octane, and all of these things. And so you've got a supplier in Texas which is going to put a bunch of oil into the pipeline because they've got a contract with a refiner in the Northeast who wants to refine so many tons or gallons of crude into a finished product that they can send to their customers or gas stations. So the contract works that the agreement is they're going to put so much crude in, and that crude is then going to be pulled off by the customer in the Northeast. But what's amazing about it is that's all the contract is. Supplier puts in so much crude and the customer pulls off so much crude. It's not the oil that the supplier sent that comes off at the refiner. It's the equivalent amount of oil.
Interesting.
And so
interesting.
Way,
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
The pipeline itself just simply exists as a resource of crude oil.
So it's kind of like the human digestion system. It doesn't matter. You're just like, you're going to get what somebody ate last.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the So it would, so relevant, data relevance, in timeliness, velocity, right. All that stuff.
Yeah. So it's all there. And so we are going to become that more and more. A digital nervous system. This is something Bill Gates wrote about in the early 2000s. He called it the digital nervous system. And at the time, they had a vision of small computers interlinked to each other doing all of this work. And essentially, that's what we have today in the cloud, is we have a bunch of small computers scattered all over the world that are all exchanging information here. What we're trying to learn is how to solve real business problems using this technology, because we have this market that says you have to get out there, get an idea going, and then you have to find an audience for it, and then you have to figure out if you can make it pay for itself, and then we'll look at you enough to figure out if we should invest in you to take it to scale, to do something really big. And I'm going, you know what? There's a lot of ideas out there that should just survive because they're really a good idea. They may not appeal to everybody, but they really deserve it. And we have the digital architecture to do that. We just have to have better data management that allows a small business to really play the API game with big businesses. Say, hey, we're a boutique provider of information related to this, and if you want that information, if you don't mind me steering the conversation a bit, I actually mentioned about the product I want to come out with next year, and it's called a curated search service. And the idea is this: we can go to Google, and Google is screaming fast. I mean, how many millions of records can it search in things? But you're only going to get what Google prioritizes as the information that you need. So, how many of us go beyond page 2, page 3? I don't think anyone gets to page 50.
Yeah,
no. Never gets to page 50, right? So everybody's competing for that top seed. What I believe is what we need is curated search. That is, back before the information age, back before internet took off, you had gatekeepers that would look at the vast number of books that people wanted to write, and they would curate them, and they'd say, this one looks interesting, this one has value, here's this, they'd send rejection slips and say, hey, doesn't really meet what we're after and things, good luck. And they'd say no, and they would curate the data for you and show you this is high value data. Now, any system can be ruined, and so there were graph, and there's people making side deals and so on to become a top author and things like that. But there's still a need for that specialist to go and say, you know what, if you want the best information on X, you should be looking at this and this and this and this and this. And that's the model I'm building in my first release, is curated search. You go out there on the internet and you randomly discover something. You go, this is A1, number one thing. Problem is, where do you put it? You download it, you stick it on your hard drive, you put it in your bookmarks, with the other 5,500 bookmarks you have. When are you going to find that one again when you need it?
That's a good point. Yeah.
What if you had a search tool like Google, but it was limited to the things you had already identified as high value items? And then what you're doing, like a recent author says, is instead of focusing on transmitting data to somebody and then forcing them to figure out what to do with it, what you're doing is you're planning for retrieval. You're loading something into the database and saying, the next time I look for this, here are the keywords that I'm going to be looking for. Here is the note about why I found it so valuable. And here's a friendly caption that will help me connect with my memory. Oh yeah, that was Joe. Joe had that really great piece on that. I want to write an article about that. And boom. And so curated search is going to be a personal search engine for individuals or small businesses that want to start focusing on the real value out in the internet and not just the volume of how much has been published on the internet. So
it sounds like you want to make a very sophisticated data labeling system.
Mm-hmm. Right. And free associations. You can take the same article and connect it to 3 different things, or whatever. If you have a reason for storing it, you should be able to connect it to anything else that makes sense to you. There should be no restrictions on, my system will have 3 different ways to organize. For instance, you'll have hierarchical, basically folders within folders. You'll have grouping or categorizing, which are big buckets. Just throw it into the HR bucket, throw it into whatever bucket. And then you'll have hashtagging, which is basically phrases or words or ideas that I am probably going to use the next time I want to find this article or this resource. And you're going to be able to, store documents. You're going to be able to store URLs to websites. Anything you can access from your computer, will be available to you in the system.
Yeah, you brought up a few good points. One of which I wanted to talk about. Well, you brought up hashtag, mm-hmm. And so my stance on the use of hashtags is people just shouldn't use them.
Okay.
They should just type the word.
Yeah.
In a coherent sentence that matches search intent. So, look, the history of hashtags goes back to lazy Twitter programmers that coded in Python, and that's why they still incorporated that comment symbol, which was the hashtag,
sure.
the pound sign. And then it started. It really got out of control. Now that's the purpose. Is the hashtags are out of control. Mm-hmm. People because a machine cannot see a photo. People think that the machines can see the photos. The machines can't see a photo. The machines see an image, and it sees pixels, and it sees if it was associated with a label that was an image that was labeled like it. Mm-hmm. And if there was no image that was labeled like it, it is blind, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so you have to explain to these machines what it is. Like if it's a picture of a dog, you have to explain this is a picture of a dog.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to know.
Right.
There are some sophisticated...
Which I might add is the whole point behind CAPTCHA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is to teach the AI what is a street sign, what is a dog, mm-hmm. so to speak. I mean, I've seen those articles too about CAPTCHA is a great idea, but it's actually a big training database for AI to deal with photo recognition, because mm-hmm. everybody's tagging this. I get your point mm-hmm. about hashtags, and for me the issue over whether you use the pound sign or not is not as important as the idea of keywords.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
that is the importance, is the idea of keywords. And another thing where in natural language processing, when you type in something into the search bar, the first thing that happens is, for the tokenization process, is it lowercases all letters, removes all white spaces, mm-hmm. combines them into one massive phrase, and then parses them out into tokens. Mm-hmm. And then you run that entire line of tokens as the first input layer into the network, and into the recursive network.
Right.
But so during that portion of the lowercasing, all common stop words, symbols to include a hashtag are removed. Mm-hmm. So you're left with just the keyword. And then when you go into the tokenization, are you leaving the keyword with something that makes sense, like how to walk a dog, as opposed to dog life, best dogs, best dog bone, dog life 2023, 20 blah blah blah, dog leashes, dog blah blah, dog, which makes no coherent sense, and nobody goes and actually searches like that.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding is, I'm sure you've been seeing it too, like the best curated searches are the ones that how does a human ask a question? Mm-hmm. What is the best place? Where is what? Yeah. How to.
Well, and those are those are important, and I'm smiling a bit here because you're describing something, and I'm going, yep, that's our problem. As if we didn't have to deal with humans entering information, into a system, mm-hmm. then maybe we could accept the nuances of all kinds of different patterns, the use of symbols and so on. But our challenge is, and I'm dealing with this every day, is I can't assume that somebody entered the information correctly.
That's so true.
And so I have to do those things. I have to lowercase because I have no idea if they put capitalization in the right place or not. Mm-hmm. So it's better to force it and not be case sensitive. I'm one of those falls on the case insensitive search all the time. I don't want to deal with people just put the wrong case on a letter. But as you were describing that tokenization problem or process, I'm going, yeah, that's what I find myself writing a lot of queries is say, strip out all the space and all the extra things and lowercase it, and then now send that into my query and go see if I can find something that matches with that. And this is why again, I like the idea of entering information as one item per entry, so it's easier just to do that and recognize that, for instance, associations. So if I give you a box and you say, okay, dog, walk, how to, or whatever, and I let you put those in, I can now go to my data source, find what those keys are for those words, and then I can go back to associations and go and say, which associations involve all of these, are common to all of these keywords. And that is going to come back with hopefully a higher, more accurate result than if I just say, find me anything that has anything to do with how to walk a dog. Mm-hmm. Because now there's all kinds of side issues that could be included in that. But again, getting back to the idea of curation, the more you focus not on random searches, and hope you get the right information, but you might become a part of a community that shares a curated search database of saying, these are the best resources for cosmetologists. These are best resources for insurance agents. And now all of a sudden, okay, it's targeted, it's focused, and I'm less likely to be inundated with all kinds of ads telling me about stuff that I didn't really care about, but they paid to be number 1, 2, and 3 on my list. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Creating, and then I think about it too, like you're in a big enough database, because that's really, because Google's just, they're a massive database, and they have all these hierarchies of models that instantly compute just to populate you a ranking system.
Right.
And
it's a great system. I don't for what they do. Mm-hmm. I think they, Paige and Bryn had a great idea, and it certainly met the need of the time. The challenge is that their ideal goal to begin with became a business.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a profitable and valuable business, and that's what they're focusing on now,
Mm-hmm.
is how to be profitable and valuable to someone other than the consumer, the user of that system. So I hear this all the time from my clients. It's like no matter what I search for related to business, Forbes comes up as the first 10 items. It's like, why? Well, because they have this massive presence, and it has the highest website ranking possible,
Mm-hmm.
next to Google itself. And so anything they publish instantly goes high if it's anywhere associated with the terms. And does that necessarily what I was looking for? No, but I'm not going to spend my time scrolling through screen after screen. You noticed how Google decided to kind of switch it up for us with now their scrolling, where they feed new entries on the bottom instead of paging through things. We're used to have the numbers and you have to go, okay, let's just jump to page 50 and see what's out on page 50. Now they don't even bother with that. They just say, if you get to the bottom, we'll just load the next 20 items or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully you'll just keep clicking down and scanning for what it is you're looking for. So it's a little psychology, ploy there. I get it. I know why it's there, but on the other hand, I used to actually like clicking on page 50 just to see what was there. But oftentimes you got that far out, it was just the same content regurgitated over and over and over again. So I'm going forward with this idea of we can do better. We can go back to the playbook and figure out what do we need today with our massive data, sources out there.
Yeah. I feel that the way of the curated search is gonna eventually get to the point where whatever information system you choose to query stuff on is gonna be the one that's gonna know your data the best, and you're gonna feel the most comfortable.
Right.
So it can basically read your mind to the point. I think that's what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what Amazon's getting at too, when they populate with an ad on your phone that you literally thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And
it gets scary sometimes, doesn't it? It's literally a thought. I had ads pop up like that where I'm seriously trying to think, what did I do that showed intent?
Mm-hmm. It's like, I know I wasn't talking about it.
I didn't talk about it. It was just in my mind. I didn't put it into a Google search, and yet suddenly I've got all this stuff showing up on Amazon that I'm going, what did I do? I must have spent too much time on an ad on my phone or something, and looking, and then suddenly it's everywhere I go. And that's our challenge. It's information overload, and I think curated search comes in as a way to deal with that. A friend that inspired me for this, her issue was it's a time saver, because she has so many platforms. She's a CEO. She has so many platforms that she's connected to in a daily basis, but she's also globally separated from her team. So she's in the United States, her team's in the Philippines and Australia. And so if she can't find it, it means hours go by before, she can contact somebody and say, hey, where was this? I remember you sent it, I can't find, or you sent it to me, I can't find it, or you told me about it and I don't remember where it was and so on. And so if there were a way that instead of all of these platforms storing your knowledge, you had one platform that you brought all that link information into, then you could build your own knowledge base, your own brain of how you look for these things. And by the way, your team can have their own. You can all share the same resource and have completely different ways
of accessing
it.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So that way, it's your list, not their list. And that's the power of it. The bigger your team gets, you know, and it certainly avoids the problems of a SharePoint where, you know, you've got so much depth, you know, so many hierarchical levels. I mean, I've dealt with SharePoints where I just don't even want to go into them because I know the information is there. They've told me it's under the department, you know, on SharePoint under the department and, you know, things. And I just spend an hour, you know, digging, looking for this resource. And I'm going, I can't find it. And I hate to go back and bug somebody, you know, say, can you tell me specifically what the path was to this? Because I can't find it.
Yeah, SharePoint can be a pain in the ass. That's the government lives and dies on SharePoint.
Right.
In fact, funny thing, that Snowden guy, that's how he got all the info, was through SharePoint. Because somebody, when they first implemented it, they gave him top-level site administrator permissions.
Oh, really?
Because they're just giving out I even got permissions at one point when I was in the Marines, because I had learned about the story, and then you go to the database manager, and he just did. They're just hiring whoever, and he didn't care. Like, yeah, I just asked, hey, can I have top-level site administrator permissions for the School of Infantry? He said, yeah, okay, here you go. And I had top-level site administrator permissions for all the School of Infantry, and I could have messed up their shit bad.
Right.
But I was like, okay, don't be evil. You know?
Yeah, that's it. That's why it's our humanity, our ethics that, you know, keeps that. And it's a challenge, you know, to be inclusive in an environment where there's so much information people need access to, and at the same time be conscious of security and realize that you need to own and control all of those assets at the same time, because if you want to thrive and survive as a business, you have to have plans, and how do you implement those things. So yeah, that's another area I get into in my business.
You said cybersecurity, and that's something I don't really know a whole lot about, but it's something I've always thought was kind of cool. But so let's talk about cybersecurity. What does your cybersecurity experience entail?
Well, so my cybersecurity experience comes out of largely my clients. So I have years ago, we're going back, you know, 2013, 2012, somewhere in there. My biggest client interfaces through APIs with a lot of big identity businesses. I'll just kind of simplify it like that and say that. So there's a lot of data sources out there that collect information about people, and through APIs we interface with it to do our search and our retrieval. And so one of those entities had a breach problem, and they ended up tightening down their security requirements. And in the effort to become more secure, they filtered all their requirements down to their partners and said, you know, because this is the problem with the digital world. When you are connected, the loose end is the small operator who doesn't have good security but has great access to something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the big corporations are up here and they're realizing we want the market, to have all these customers out here. But if we transmit information to them, we need to know that they're protecting this information. So this company came to my client and said, if you're going to continue this business relationship with us, you need to comply with our security requirements. And it had to do with how computers talk to each other, how they store or don't store information, how the database is structured to protect, unauthorized access, like you were just describing. So we had all of this, and this is in 2012, and my 13, and my customer is big by my standards. I'm a solopreneur. I mean, they're big. They had 50, 60 people working for them. But in terms of the partners they worked with, they were still really small. So we're bootstrapped, meaning we have to pay for everything that goes on here. And every time we tried to be compliant with them, there was just something else. We had to go and buy something else, some other tool, some other resource to meet their standards. And eventually my customer realized that it wasn't worth it. The expense to become compliant didn't pay off with the data they were giving us.
And of no federal regulation for compliance at all, just
right.
Whatever games they want to make up.
Right. And so eventually they figured out there was a competitor that didn't have the same degree of security requirements that would give them the same data. So they just went sideways. But then we started, cybersecurity became a bigger and bigger issue, and suddenly our customers were sending us items to fill out because we were a vendor now. In a vendor relationship, you've got a partner here that's using your services and you're storing information on their behalf. They have to be compliant, and so they're sending us all these surveys to say, please complete your cybersecurity practices surveys and things like that. And so eventually we got this realized point. We said, okay, we got to do this. This has got to happen. And so we finally did complete an ISO 1.13 compliance. But we spent thousands of dollars to go through and write up all the documentation and all the things and build out all the education, all the resources that needed to be in place. And as I was participating in this, I'm a vendor of a vendor, and so I'm involved, and I'm filling out surveys and I'm answering questions and going through weekly meetings and so on. I'm realizing, what? Those small companies on the bottom tier are, the Achilles heel to big business, because you want them as a customer, you want them part of your system, but if they connect to you remotely, if they have API access and so on and so forth, and then they get compromised, one of the biggest compromises recently came about because somebody went home from their work and didn't protect their home computer, and somebody piggybacked on that home computer into the big network and compromised not just that company but thousands of customers downline with that. And it was it's a scary situation. And so I'm looking at this and going, small businesses need some help. And so I have worked with the Washington State Small Business Development Center on a data analysis project, and they were doing cybersecurity webinars. And so they got a grant to expand what they were doing. This was, they were doing them in person, and then COVID hit. And so during the pandemic, they kind of tabled it. But then they got a grant because there's a big push now at the federal level to increase the compliance requirements for those that do work with the government. So more small businesses are getting pulled into this area because if you are connected to a vendor who provides services to the federal government, that data has to be controlled and managed according to CMMC. I'm gonna forget. Cybersecurity maturity model compliance.
So is that like a government regulation board?
It is an extension of the NIST standards for information security, specifically built for the military. So they're the ones that are driving this, and the Congress has passed laws that by next year, companies that do work with the military in any capacity that handle military-related information have to be CMMC compliant in order to have their contract. It'll be written into the contracts. So, there's a big push right now in the industry to be CMMC compliant. And the interesting thing about it is it's based on a maturity model, which is you don't have to be compliant day one, just like my customer did. In order to be 127001 compliant, they had to meet every standard. Everything had to be documented and so on.
Sounds horrible.
CMMC actually says, let's do some good hygiene, and you just declare that you are following good hygiene with your business. And then if you have to go up higher than that, then you'll have to start actually documenting what you do and have an auditor come in and review that and make sure you are actually doing what you say you're doing. And that's what led me into doing this cybersecurity work, is because I think that first tier, that first level self-certified is really pretty basic stuff, but it comes down to committing yourself on paper to doing things. You can't just say, oh yeah, I got antivirus. Yeah, but did you pay the renewal for it? Did you set up scanning so that it's scanned routinely? Are you running your patches? And how do you prove to somebody that you are doing what you're doing? And this is important to every business because it's not just the federal government that's looking at you. It's 50 state governments that are looking at you, that have written laws that say, if you're the source of a breach of our citizens' data, then you have to notify us within so many days that you've been breached. And you have to do all these steps to protect our citizens. And there's not one standard, there's 50 standards of that across the United States. So if you're a digital first business, you've got a lot of watchdogs that are just waiting for something to happen. And so from a compliance and a resilience, a survivability level, you really need to take this a little more seriously. So that's why a year ago I wrote, after working with the cybersecurity webinar series, I realized the big message that needed to come out of there is just write a policy.
Okay.
Just get started. And so I've written a book that's available on Amazon to, actually write a CMMC.
You're an author?
Policy. I'm an author.
We'll have to get that book in the video description so people can check that out.
Yeah. And that book is my encouragement. We call it, in our circle, we call it the PPE.
Okay,
and in recognition of the pandemic, we say policy, procedure, and evidence. You have to have all three if you want to be able to defend yourself in a court of law that while there may have been a breach, you had done your due diligence. You had done everything possible. I mean, we realize bad actors are bad actors. They're going to get us at some point. The question is, did we put up a defense? And our evidence is going to be that proof that we had a policy, we followed it, we had a procedure, we were doing it, and we have evidence to show that we performed all of those actions.
Yeah, no, you brought up a great point, and it makes me think about what is data governance. Mm-hmm. And so what is data governance to you?
Well, it's a really broad...
It is broad.
It's a broad term. I mean, so I think for the audience I would speak to, I would say data governance is an awareness that your business is primarily a data business. My friend Sherry, I referred to earlier, she used to use this in her classes when she was teaching Access. She says, isn't it wonderful to be an information business in the information age? And she was saying that very honestly, because every business is an information business. You might sell widgets, but you know where to go buy the widgets at one price that are worth a higher price. And so you are in the information business of identifying where they come from and who needs them, and then connecting the asset and the resource together so that you can make some money. Mm-hmm. Every business is an information business. So fundamentally, you have to look at your business and say, what are my data assets? What is it I know about my unique offers, my unique value, my customers, about their transactions? And then you have to look at what do you fall into as needs for protecting that information. Different businesses will have different compliance. PCI, if you take credit cards, if you deal with any, you have to do credit card management. If you are in a medical field, you have HIPAA compliance you have to be worried about. If you're in the financial industries, you have Sarbanes-Oxley. You have personal data that you retrieve. And another problem is we have this idea, well, I don't have it. I put it out there in the cloud. It's just software out there. That's where the compliance is. Problem is, if you use third parties, if you read their fine text in their agreements, they specifically require that you indemnify them against breaches and other things that are acts of bad actors, and that you put that customer data in that situation. So if they get breached, it's not their issue necessarily, unless gross negligence can be proven. But then again, that's a whole nother fight. But you can still have customers that can go after you, because if it wasn't for the relationship they had with you, their information would have never been in that system.
God, what a conundrum.
Yeah. And that's what data governance is like, how many things are going on here? And this is why, as a community, we need to keep coming together and having conversations like this and asking ourselves, what can we be doing better about this? And I realize a lot of us, are focused on what do we do to pay the bills next month? But this is a bigger concern, because, you might not have to worry about next month's bills if breach is big enough, and things. It's like you have only one option, and the bills are going to be the least of your concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really, I don't want to, I'm not a fearmonger. I don't like to say, oh God, you have to go do this. It's just drop everything, do this now. But I am a believer in continuous improvement projects. So you have to sit down and ask yourself, what is it I can start now? And sometimes it's just an assessment. What are my assets? What do I need to protect? And then as you grow, just keep revisiting that and say, oh, now I have an employee. Oh, okay. My procedures need to change.
Mm-hmm.
I need to start protecting certain data from other data. I need a new VA working on customers, but they don't need to see the financials.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need all of the infantry access to all of the infantry, data.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you specifically do? Okay, let's give you that slice of information, and let's not give you broad access to everything.
Yeah. I also think about, you made me think of some good questions I'll have to ask. But the first thing I thought of is, in the world of data governance, I think of how many court cases that are going on right now with, like Google suing Facebook, and they're all suing each other over who owns the data.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's not you, the user.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? So it's like, there's all these levels of, one, you got to do something to keep yourself safe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a business that is getting customer credit card data, you should try to cover your ass in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's like, oh, I have Norton antivirus and I use Squarespace. I mean, and I think that's why people like the third party.
Right.
Like, so they can like pawn off liability on a third party system. But
but they can't. That's the thing. I work with a risk manager as part of my association with Small Business Development Center, and he is really big on this.
Okay.
He says if you handle data, you should be getting cyber insurance, because cyber insurance identifies first party, third party responsibilities.
I think that makes more sense. Insurance. Yeah. Because it's like you can wear all the protective gear to happen against the accident, but it's like, okay, well, it's gonna happen. Yeah. We might be the subject of a ransomware attack, which would suck. Right.
Absolutely. And that's the problem, because the ransomware attack might be costly, but it's just the part above. It's just the part of the iceberg above the water. It's once people realize this has happened, now they're going to start digging down and see how much of that is
this was a symptom of
the bigger problem and things. And the advantage of having insurance, and this is why in cybersecurity, probably cyber insurance is driving more compliance than anything else. Because early on, insurance companies saw a lot of money in protecting businesses from bad actors, and so they were saying, hey, we're going to put up, they looked at it on their actuarial tables. They were looking at it, how many businesses globally actually get impacted by ransomware versus the total number of business, and think, oh, this is great. If we just sign somebody up, we're going to make a killing on this. Only thing they found out is every time somebody got breached, the level of costs of what it took to restore that business back to whole was enormous, because there was the physical cost, replacing equipment and all that, there was the data, there was the lost downtime for business that were not functional. Then there was the lawsuits regarding, with this, and you start diving into these things, and they started going, wow, this is not a good business to be in. because it might be, it might be an inch wide, but it goes a mile deep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's too expensive. So now the insurance agent companies are starting to go, we're going to tighten up the requirements. And we're going to require that you demonstrate to us that in fact you are doing everything you can to protect your business. Then we'll issue you an insurance policy.
So you got to prove yourself.
You have to prove
so
yourself.
So kind of like, like the life insurance that
Right. You have, if you're going to get life insurance, you have to go and have a healthcare visit. They have to determine what is your risk of cancer, what is your risk of heart disease and things. And then they're going to classify that risk before they issue you, your policy. And that's going to affect how much it costs you. So insurance is really going to drive this, a lot. And so if you're a physical business, that has indemnity for somebody falling in your store or stuff like that, cyber insurance is a completely different creature. You can't just piggyback on that and say, I also want a rider for, because a lot of those policies we call rider, data cyber rider policies are really just about equipment replacement. It's hardware. It's like, okay, if the store burns up, we'll replace your computer. Okay, great. That doesn't put me back in business. We got a classic one in Spokane last year on August 15th. A local company, and I'm going to draw a blank on this one, a jewelry maker, had an incident on there. They were 50 years in business, and they were just high on a hog. They had big orders coming in for their 50th anniversary. They were, $5 to $10 million a year revenue generating company and things. On August 15th, they had an incident, and on September 1st, they filed for bankruptcy. Liquidation. They're gone. Just like that.
For one cyber breach.
One cyber, yeah.
On a jewelry company.
Reading between the lines, I think it was really a matter of they didn't, because of a message they sent through Journal of Business, they didn't have good backups of their data.
Damn.
And so, something happened. I don't know that it was a cyber breach necessarily, but whatever it was, they could not recover from that.
They had no good data governance.
Yeah.
And because of that, it crushed their business.
Yep. And they had inventory, they had orders, they had everything a business needed, excepting for the data that connected all of that together. And that's why data governance is so critical, even for a small business. This was a very profitable business, but it was not a huge one. In fact, they were mostly online.
That's a good point. And it's a good point people don't think. And that's only one subset of data governance. That's one subset. And I think in terms of data governance, to the point where when I get a data set, like from an open repository, like Kaggle.com, I have this level of trust that it's not going to be a dummy data set. And that's the thing, is people can start to control the media through those data sets that they're putting out too.
Right.
So
it's changing everything about the way we interact with the world. It's unfortunate because we have a lot of history about trust. That if you heard it on the nightly news, you always trust Walter Cronkite. He was going to tell you what you needed to know. But we don't have that anymore. And that may be unfortunate, but it's also certainly a good thing in the sense that we don't have those gatekeepers that are necessarily keeping us from having access to information. But what it does is it forces on us the need to be more conscious of how we consume information.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see a lot of things on social media, and some of them seem scary. And I'm going, wow, if that was really true. But I have a certain process, and that is I don't follow the link that's offered. I take the keywords from that, and I go and I research it independently and see if I can come to the same conclusion. If there are other sources that are saying the same information, the same source, and I know what those sources are, I know which ones I do trust, which ones I have suspect, especially if I can get multiple sources to agree on something, then I have more value in it. But this is why I treat data as a scientist.
Mm-hmm. As you should.
Data is just that.
Mm-hmm.
But science says, is it repeatable? Can I do the same thing given the same parameters and get the same result? If I can do that over and over again, then it's trustworthy. But if I get different results, okay, I don't understand it yet, so now I have to have new hypothesis. Well, maybe it's this. Go collect new evidence, put it together and say, oh, okay, that model fits the information better than what I was previously thinking. And so that's a big area of data that we have to start educating ourselves about. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the direction we're going.
Oh, no. It's hard to find people that even understand the concept of like a categorical or a continuous variable. It's hard to really want to get people to be interested in statistics because like you said, just because the data is just because you have a data set, and a lot of people have these pie in the sky field of dreams ideas too. Like they'll come up and they'll be like, I want to create an AI that can do this. And as soon as they say AI, I can tell, all right, you're a user, not a developer. Because the developer is going to say ML. All right, they're going to say AI. That's like usually what the users say. And then, they have some pie in the sky dream. And then the first thing I say is, well, depends on the data you got. All right. So yeah, you might want that model, but if your variables aren't normal, or if there's some sort of skewed distribution, you're going to have to use another model. And then we're going to have to run it through several models and see which ones work. And most of these pie in the sky ideas that people have, they don't realize what is involved with it. Like they're like yesterday I was talking to this guy and he was like, yeah, I basically just want like a person that can advise policymakers on stuff. I'm like, so you want to create an attorney? Like, well, I was like, well, if you want to create an attorney, do you have a server farm? Because you're going to need a massive server farm. Do you have the data? Do you have teams of data scientists? Right. And all this stuff, are you going to retain these data scientists? What happens if there's an update?
Yeah.
And everything's gone. Everything you work for is gone. What are you going to do?
And our challenge is that we have a really we've had a player that burst onto the scene that seems so much smarter than it really is. And I'm not a naysayer. I use ChatGPT all the time.
You should.
I love working with it.
I love it.
Yeah, it is a great
steroids for administrative tasks, and everybody's juicing.
Right. Yeah, it is a great time saver. But I also understand how it works, so I am not expecting more from it than it's really capable of. So I love the analogy I heard earlier this year about it. It's just an algorithm that figures out what's the percentage that the next word will be X. So when you put in your prompt, all it's doing is starting with a word and then figuring out algorithmically what is the next logical word that would follow this one. And so it's constantly playing that game.
Mm-hmm.
And so based on your prompt, it can generate all kinds of different results.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, I was playing around and I got it to confess that it was just making stuff up.
Yeah, it'll hallucinate, which is intelligent.
Yeah.
And what I think is, well, you brought up the point, and a lot of people think this too. A lot of people just reduce it down to the recursive neural network, right? But it's more than just that network. Mm-hmm. It's all the hierarchical clustering models. It's any sort of logistic regression and linear regression, all these ensemble methods working in tandem just to make ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And
sound real.
Yeah. And I'm meeting some of these guys and they're just talking about how, I don't know if you've ever heard of Hugging Face. Hugging Face is, I just was brought up to it. It's a platform where you can, it's got data sets and it's got language models that you can employ somehow. I still have to learn it, how to employ it, but it's like one of those codeless platforms. But people seem to have this idea that, just plug in the word text and you'll get this output on the model. But like, that's already made for you guys. That's like the car, the instrument, the vehicle is already made for you to use, and they're not seeing the team of engineers on the back end.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that is our challenge to communicate to people, is understand that this didn't happen, last year. Mm-hmm. They didn't just suddenly come with this idea, hey, let's create ChatGPT. They've been working on this for decades. I like the comedy routines I see about the AIs, in the back office when they're having break or things. I liked one recently. Alexa is talking to Siri and Bing, or not Bing, the one on Android, and they're all sitting in the office and or in the lunchroom, and they're just talking about what's going on, and and ChatGPT comes in and wants to talk to them and things, and they're just ChatGPT, you're so it's like, and they're just throwing shade and all of this, and then suddenly in the whole thing, Clip It shows up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just bawling. Little Clip It from 1990s Office.
Yep.
The first attempt to do something for you based on an algorithm, and it was watching what you typed and then figure out, this is the help you're looking for, and things. And I'm going, this didn't just happen. There have been data scientists, and I respect that. I mean, you're talking about some things here that I intellectually understand, and I am grateful that there are human beings that can get into that and figure all that stuff out. But fundamentally, I am a business developer. I want to do business, and all of that data science I respect, and I wish I understood more of it. But in the end, what I want is what makes it possible for me to solve a customer's problem. Because in the end, the market is driven by solving a problem, not the technology. The tech, if all you do is focus on, I've got this cool tech, you're going to tune out most of your potential audience, because they don't need a tech solution. They need a problem solved that affects their ability to stay in business. And so you need to be going and having these real world conversations with them as, what are you trying to solve? what is the impact that this is going to have on your business if you don't solve it? And then what is the root cause? What does it seem to be? And now we can go over to tech and say, okay, where does AI, where does just good database solve this problem for you, this root cause? And if you were able to do that, then how could you leverage it and grow your business? So that's the important thing about all of this stuff is to appreciate and embrace the wonderful technology, but at the same time realize that in the end, if it doesn't have an impact on another human being, if it doesn't make their world easier, better, you get the one button one button thing. I was just suddenly picturing that, just do it kind of thing. But that takes more than just the algorithms. It takes a process. It takes a system working together to achieve that. And so if anything ties everything all together, that's probably where we need to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you get customers?
Well, that's been my interesting development. So ideally, I have been a top-down model of business, which is so a top-down model is you have big ticket, and then you work your way down to small ticket type things. Bottom up, you start with small tickets and then figure out what they want, and you go to big ticket items.
Gotcha.
I actually developed my company on, I don't know, over the last 20 years, 23 years next January in business. I have developed my business on 6 customers, 7 maybe. Any active, any given point in time, I have, maybe 4 active customers. And so my model was always just word of mouth, because I work with people, they develop a trust for me. They really respect my knowledge, what I can do. They listen to my ideas and they get excited about, wow, we could do this. And then they mention it to somebody. So I've had several projects that, developed, didn't end up going anywhere. We just kind of ended them. But my active customers are all, word of mouth generated from my early days, honestly. My 2 longest customers I've had for 20 years. And so all that happened is over the years, we just kept escalating what they pay me to be available. And that's what I do, is a lot of retainer basis. It's just, as I say in the vernacular, I say, so much per month will get my attention. And so let's figure out what that number is. That's changing now in that I am starting to develop all these diverse areas. So my database work, I'm really steering towards releasing a platform, a SaaS platform next year. And so I'll have a subscription-based model, for that, and just do general listen for people to explain they have a problem. I've had really good experience in the last year with in-person networking. Has really grown my market, so to speak. Hasn't really landed many, new customers too much yet, but I'm having a lot of conversations now that I never had. Mm-hmm. So in-person is really big networking. I don't do the social media marketing things, mostly because I'm so bootstrapped, mm-hmm. and I've never really created that buffer where I can just throw money at ads and things. So it really comes down to writing, posting, building an audience, people who'll have conversations with me and things. And a lot of that has changed in the last year because I got into a process called gap selling, in which now the conversation is about listening for people to express a problem that I think I can have a positive impact on. Getting them to describe what that problem is from a business point of view. Not you need a search engine, but actually, I'm not being productive with my time, and this is costing me so much in lost time per month, and what's the value of that, and so on. Then asking them leading questions, getting them into what's the impact, what is things, and then why do you think this is happening? Where is it? And being a diagnostic seller, where I say, tell me what your problem is. I want to listen to this, and I want to see if I can help. And I can help a couple of different ways. One is I may have the means and the knowledge to help you directly, or more likely, I am developing a large network of connections.
Mm-hmm.
And so I may know somebody who has what you need, and so obviously with my ability to do websites and databases and cybersecurity, and really I like to classify myself as a chief information officer. What information do you need? Let's figure out how to build that into your business. But I also realize that there are other experts, there are other specialists, and if I can connect you with one of those, then it seems particularly valuable. So I'm really working more on developing those peer-to-peer networks where we're exchanging leads with each other and saying, hey, I did one online to online kind of connection. I'm in one group, and somebody came on and said they were having problems with Infusionsoft. I don't remember what their new brand is now. Keep, and Keep support wasn't able to help him. And he was frustrated. He had a deadline. He needed to get it out, within 24, 48 hours. Anyone know, somebody could help him. And I happen to another network. I happen to be connected to a guy who is Keep authorized, and I just said, okay, Tom, I can get you to John, and I made that connection, and it turned out that John knew exactly what Tom needed, and he was able to do it in a Zoom call in 10 minutes, where Keep support had taken 2 hours and couldn't come up with a solution. That's a win for me, because on the one hand, Tom is now in my debt, because he hit his launch date. I've got a good relationship now with John, going, hey, I can connect you with things. Who knows what may come later out of this, but that's business growth opportunity. And that's what I'm trying to work on more and build that. So we're doing a lot of in-person stuff here in Spokane and things. And I'm also building an online community, a same mindset. We call it All for One Academy. And it's business owners that want to network together in an education-based idea.
Is it in person?
No, it's an online.
Oh, okay.
It's an online group. So we're having another event coming up on the 26th and things. And it's an international. This one, the goal is to be global on that. But what we want to do is, we know there are a lot of businesses out there that are struggling with various problems they want, and they go online and they Google for it, and they hear about a walker, system for launching things, or they want to do, and they spend thousands of dollars to get something that is scaled way beyond where they're at.
Yeah.
And they can't do it because it's too complex, too hard to understand, and they don't have the money for it, or they don't have the followers, the audience that it's going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so now they spend money on stuff that isn't going to work. What we want to do is we want to answer questions, bring people together, explore ideas, and those of us who can go out there and join the Walker's, product launch formula, or be a part of Brian Kurtz's, Titans Accelerators, can bring our learning back to a community and say, let me share you with what I learned. Like last week, I sat in an awesome presentation by Sue Rice on how to use story and metaphor in copywriting. It's phenomenal. Looking forward to doing a session with her. I want to share that with people because I think there are a lot of small businesses that would be able to benefit from that and not have to pay the price of having Sue Rice teach them how to do this. Now, someday I hope they really do grow to be the business that can go to a Sue Rice and say, teach me everything. I want to know everything you know. But I also want to meet them at that stage in which they're not there yet. And they're spending money left and right trying to do things that really they should be doing, for themselves. If they just understood a model, an algorithm, if you will. I think we can do that person to person as well as with computers.
Mm-hmm.
What's your algorithm for getting a lead? What's your algorithm for closing a deal? Those kind of things.
Yeah, like you said, you have to nail that one particular business problem that they want to solve. And a lot of people... Well, you said something that made me think of what Professor Tatao Chong said when during... No, it was not him. It was another professor. Either way, it was basically some sort of like cartoon parody of some database salesman just trying to always push, you need a database. You just need to buy a database.
Right.
For some company that doesn't even need a database, or they already have a database.
Database, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that gets back into something I referenced, gap selling.
Mm-hmm.
The problem businesses have is not closing deals. I mean, for the right customer, for the right situation, it should be obvious, and that's what gap selling is all about. Find $1 million problem you can solve, and find the person who has that $1 million problem, and your $50,000 or $100,000 fee for that is a no-brainer. I mean, think about it. If you're losing $1 million and you can stop losing $1 million for $100,000, who wouldn't spend that all day long?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we are running up against the resistance to change.
Mm-hmm. People are very
status
resistant.
quo,
Yeah.
because everything you buy is a requirement on you to change.
Mm.
And what you don't know in every purchase decision is the true ramifications of all the different things that lead to that. My founder's story about IDIC Designs comes from that lesson. So as a trainer, I got into teaching SQL Server, and I had Spokane Transit come in and take my classes. I had big companies, BF Goodrich and things, local companies, but they'd come in and take my SQL Server classes and things, and I'd listen to their stories. And one particular story jumps out at me because they came in, and I always asked them, why are you here in class? What are you hoping to learn? What do you want to get out of it? And they said, well, we're here because our CEO, not our CEO, our VP of sales went to a conference, got a product, authorized the purchase of a $150,000 product because it was going to give him a report that he needed in order to, grow the business. So we got the product, we installed it, we did all the setup, we put it on everybody's desk, and everybody balked. They just refused to use it because the product was based on principles that did not match their business. And so when they were suddenly confronted with, okay, I used to do my job in, an hour or 2 hours or things, and now I have to do all these new things, and it's going to take me longer, or I don't understand how the system works, and I'm going to do this wrong, and so on and so forth. There was just a big revolt on that floor of people, and eventually it got all the way up to the executive level, and they shelved it. They literally took that product, put it on the shelf, and said, we're not going to use it. It was $150,000 that they spent, and it didn't work.
Probably for something they could have done for free too.
All right.
If they thought about it.
If they had thought about it. And that's why I started my business, because I said data is so important. If you get the data right, the process is a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't get the data right, the process will never be perfect. The system may survive because that's what systems do. Systems exist because they reach an equilibrium where they work.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with that is that they resist change unless there's a new goal, a new purpose. And so gap selling comes into this mix by saying you have to figure out what is that future state, what is that goal that you want to achieve that is so real and so absolutely important that you will be motivated. Your problem, the state you're in right now, is so intolerable and untenable. You cannot wish it away anymore. You have to do something. Then you make the decision, I'm going to change. And so status quo is what we have to look at. We have to go and say, if they're comfortable where they're at and we can't figure out what makes them uncomfortable with their current situation, then stop selling them. You'll never get there.
Yeah, and you brought up some points. Technology trains the user. People are resistant to change. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've noticed people will exchange privacy for optimization. Mm-hmm. When you're going to try to implement some new policy or product, you have to have a product champion who's always there to try to encourage people to want to try it because everybody's so resistant. Yeah. And if it's not freer, faster, easier, it's going to be a hard sell.
That's right. Individuals, and that is that gap. You're looking for what is the problem that they really feel, and and to do that you have to understand the impact on them. Why is it costing them personally? It could be a personal thing. It doesn't have to always be a financial thing, but they have to reach that point of saying, this is so painful that I have to do something, and so the question is what is that thing? Because sometimes it's not clear on the surface what's going on, but you have to be a good listener, good at questions, good at understanding things that others may not even be aware of, but you can guide them to that. Through a discovery, you can guide them to understand that you understand what they're going through, and you can help them quantify what it costs them to do nothing. And then once you reach that, then you can figure out, can I help them? Mm-hmm. Sometimes I can't. It's like, I had one. I gained and lost a customer this year because of that. I'm convinced that the what I offered was needed, was necessary, so I wouldn't have moved forward without it. And she was sure it was needed too. The problem we ran into had to do with compatibility issues and things. And at that point, the effort to change this environment to eliminate compatibility problem and the effort to understand what the problem was and figure out, what needed to change was just well beyond the value of continuing, the thing. And so the easiest answer for me was she said, I just need to go back. And I said, sure, let me recommend an antivirus and a couple of other things that you should do. And then let's stay in touch,
Mm-hmm.
because there are other issues. I mean, she still needs things that I can offer, but I didn't see any point in losing a relationship over the fact that my solution didn't work with her particular situation. Mm-hmm. So that's the important thing. Building relationships in business is don't become dependent on them to where you feel like you have to keep them at any cost, because it can be expensive and detrimental to you.
Yeah, it could be toxic too,
Mm-hmm.
if it's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So where? Oh, what was I gonna ask? Oh, I forget. No. Oh, let's say I was like some random person at Madco Lab there. Let's say I'm a sticker salesman. I got some farmers market things I do. I sell my wares, and I want to start taking customer credit card payments through Square or something. So what low cost thing could I do to protect myself with cybersecurity?
So generally, what I'm going to say is the lowest cost thing to do is to actually educate yourself on the habits and things. My book, for instance, covers the 6 steps of security from a CMMC model. So things like physical security. You need to have a plan for your device. You're at a farmer's market. What happens if you are not present? Who has access to your tablet, your phone, whatever it is, and all of that? And then from there is like user accounts and password management and so on. And these are all things that are well defined. We know what we need to know about them. You need to be committed to them. And so that is where writing your policy is going to be your first, level of engagement. Now, I know the impulse is, well, can I just get a template? Can I, isn't there a place I can download one? And I'm going, yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that will sell you a template and say, just fill it, put your name in here and boom, you got a policy. And it won't work. And it won't work because you're not committed to it. You're going through the motions, but you haven't actually bought the concept. So the best cost, least cost is to buy a resource and then do the work yourself to be committed to it. Now, at some point, yes, you're going to need outside vendors and support and so on. And I'm trying to build these bundles for businesses to say, start here, because my association with small business development centers, I have free booklets and things, and then I can also add my book for a small additional cost and things. And I'm doing these to just get people to accept that something is better than just downloading and making it up, being committed to it. So that's what I'm encouraging everybody and things. And that's something that I hope to be able to offer at Madco, Lab Pad, as just an ongoing event where we can get together and just exchange question answer periods and things like that, and maybe some ongoing tutoring, and saying, get you through this process. And then, because I believe in the long term, you grow, you become successful, I'll be there and with more resources, and say, hey, now that you're in a place you can spend money, here's how you can take this further with that. So those are the things I've been working on.
Yeah. And you're a legit businessman and very good at your craft and trade.
Thank you.
So you know what's up. You actually know what's going on. So we got about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
So anything that's on your heart, you're feeling?
No, I guess I'd loop back a little bit. Because you brought up the issue of privacy and trading, and in my information systems class, we have a lot of catchy ways of saying it. That is, if the offer is free, then you're the product. So you get Facebook for free because you are the product that they're selling to all the advertisers. And so it's important to always look with a reasonable eye and ask yourself, what am I doing here? What is this important? And understand that exchange. I do actually have a long-term vision of a time in which personal data will be something you house online and you offer to provide to vendors that you want to do business with, on the understanding that they're validating that this is true and legitimate information and valid, and they're not going to store that information. So you control that information. I actually, in one of my wild dreams, I had actually envisioned a reverse Facebook where we advertise the membership and we say, we've got, small business owners, we've got males in, this age range and da-da-da-da-da. And some advertiser comes along and says, I want to market to them. And we say, okay, that's fine. We'll write up an agreement. You're going to provide this much resources and you want this much in return. And then we'll go to the membership through an online process and say, I have a vendor in this space who wants to target, this. You appear to be in a match. Would you like, to hear from them for X amount? And that money flow coming from the advertiser actually goes back to the person that is actually being advertised to. So you build people, you've heard of secret shoppers. Well, this is, secret ads. It's like, you don't know, we can tell you, generally speaking, who you're going to be speaking to. And if we meet a threshold, if we can show you that we've got so many people who will respond to that, then we will close that contract. And then from there, when you view that ad, you get credit in your account for that, ad spend that they made. Turn it around so that we own the data and we own the value of that data. You want to advertise to me? Great. Show me the money. And I'm happy to look at your ad. Mm-hmm. What I resist is this idea that, everybody can throw their ad up in front of me. They can interrupt me, and I don't have a chance to say no. I just wanted to read the article. I had 2 minutes, and I wanted to know this information, and I clicked, and boom, there's this. And I think this is what we're reacting to. In fact, Sue Rice in her book Tiny Thunder actually brought this up in her model. She says the problem is we've got too many interruptions. We have too many people who want to just interrupt us in our busy day to put something in front of us. Mm-hmm. And we feel frustrated because we didn't value that interruption. It wasn't something I was looking for. And yet we have a marketing experts out there saying, this is how you make money. You interrupt people, and then you'll get a certain percentage of them that will follow. Yeah. But there's 90% of them that you just interrupted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's not like I like people's ads when I'm watching a YouTube video. No, mm-hmm. I hate them more. It's like, no, I really don't want your product.
Right.
But yeah, no, you're right. And it made me think of data marts. Mm-hmm. Just purchasing the data. So you brought up if it's not, if it's free, you're the product. And I just started exploring. I was like, where's a good place I can get all sorts of people's data that I could just purchase it and have the data? Oh, Experian, Equifax, and the other. If you're getting free if you're doing your free credit checks, they are taking all your data and they are selling it.
Oh, well, they're much bigger than that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I work with Experian. Equifax. I always get those two swapped around. I work with Equifax, and yeah, you bet. I mean, that's what their business is. Their business, the credit monitoring part of it, and the credit formula, that's a small part of their business. They're data aggregators, mm-hmm. and this is a whole field in business that I don't think consumers are aware of.
No, it's a whole asset class.
Yeah. Data aggregators are gathering data from all kinds of sources and pulling them together and then repackaging and repurposing them and getting them out. Now, this works to your advantage. I mean, I love the fact that we can go to the government and we can download tons of data for free. Because that's what the federal government is for. That's why we have regulations, is for the agencies to gather data about business and do it in a way. In my class, I actually use a data source from the Department of Education that shows student graduation from universities by degree and by level of degree. And I love running through that example and saying, what is the best degree to have in business, and so on, and show not just how many graduates they made, but how much cost it cost them, and how much they expected to earn as a result of the degree, and so on. And then you can go through and build your own pivot tables and go through and analyze and say, it's not an AI model, and there's so much more you could do with it. But for any business, they can go to the what I'm trying to think of, census data, mm-hmm. and gather census data together for various things. That's publicly available. You don't have to pay for this stuff. Of course, obviously, for the ones that are paying, there's a much higher level of value to it, so to speak. Much more process.
And then I think about like, okay, so yeah, and here's another thing people don't think of too. You're right. They're aggregators. For some reason, people think that there's some all-seeing eye in the sky that just aggregates all this data and is somewhere. And I'm like, no, it's siloed. And you have to compile it. It takes teams of people to work together to compile all this information in a place.
Yeah. I will not to throw conspiracy or shade into this. I was just thinking about, you say there's not one place. Well, I agree. In a public space, there is not one space. Obviously, we do have our national security, which does tend to be a super aggregator of pulling all kinds of resources together into this. But there's a really great documentary out there on the human face of big data. And there's a really great segment in that documentary. It's one I showed my students every semester about, the balance between the value of algorithmic access to knowledge, of things that, big data is a super microscope. A microscope allowed us at light wavelength to be able to drop down below, visible into the invisible world. Big data is the reverse of that. We can also learn things by going big and looking at patterns in minute little flow of transactions and things. And this whole documentary does a really good job of playing both sides.
The big face of big,
the
human face of big data.
Big data. Yeah.
Which brings up another point. So how do you define big data?
Well, essentially for me, it's just simply that sense. Big data is information aggregated to a scale in which the individual becomes insignificant. So if I look at you, I look at me, we're in a space, we're together. There's no big data here. We consume what we have exposure to. Okay. If I want to understand the traffic flow in Spokane County, there are thousands of drivers. Any given moment, there's no way we can know, and this gets into physics. You can't know the position and the motion or the acceleration of anything at the same time. You can know where they're at. You can know how fast they're going. You can't, know both. That's just a fundamental physical principle. Well, the same thing happens with data. You can know where they were at a given moment in time, but you can't know where they went next or what happened, unless you have a massive data set that covers all of that. But if you collect all that data, then you can begin to see a pattern in where things happen. People tend to flow, across these corridors. It's like, I would love to understand how we got to the traffic jams that happen on I-90 now, because I've been in Spokane long enough. That was never a thing. And yet within the last 3 years, now it's a thing. A slowdown from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 5. Now, what's useful about that? Because Google Maps is tapping into individual reports of accidents and other things, and then bringing that up to a level at which they coordinate that with all other sources, and then they can show you, hey, right now through downtown Spokane out to Sprague exit, it's slower than normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's big data.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about, is fuzz this specific out, kind of, cross your eyes a little bit, and then and then look for what's left. What's consistency here? And that's your pattern.
It's a good way to put it. That I ask these questions because I find that the more I learn that there's no standard definition in this industry as to what big data is. I agree with all that, what you just said. My caveat is data that's so big I can't use Excel to manipulate
sure.
it.
That's right. Right. Yeah. Well, and even for me, data that's so big, I can't use a single database. And we actually did back in the day, when I was teaching how to build SQL Server databases, we would always have a section in the course about very large databases. And VLDBs is what we called them then. And the rule of a VLDB was, if you cannot back up and restore the database in a reasonable amount of time, then you have a VLDB, very large database. And that was our standard for that. If you can't, and back when I was more into the industry, I had a chance to talk with Microsoft engineers who ran their SQL servers, and they would talk about, a full database backup for their Asia database would take 2 weeks. And as soon as the full backup was finished, it would basically turn around and start over, because it was just their data management required that there always be a full backup of the current data. And there was always these stories about, different departments, different divisions having to manage their servers as, because of how much data they had. And that's still my general for any business. My standard definition is, it's big data if you can't back up and restore it within a reasonable amount of time. And I'm getting close to dealing with data that's that large. I had one where we were doing a recovery and we almost missed our window because it was so long to download the data and restore it and all of that. And it left me going back and going, okay, I need to treat this as a very large database. I need to change the way I'm backing up and off-site storing it so I can be able to recover faster.
Yeah. It reminds me of when you're talking that there's this meme. It shows Bart Simpson writing on the chalkboard and it says, Excel is not a database. Excel is not like over and over.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my other one I would throw in there is Exchange is not a database either.
Exchange is not a database. Yeah.
Yeah. Your email client is not a database.
Nope.
So
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been 3 hours.
All right.
Yeah. So,
fun.
Rob, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, idicdesigns.com is one easy place to find me. And I also spent a lot of time on LinkedIn at Robbie Reuter, or Robert Reuter is my profile, LinkedIn. And if you want to dash me an email, it's just robr@idicdesigns.com.
Okay, yeah. We'll have all those links in the video description below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and smash that bell for more data-driven updates. Bye.